The boardroom on the 42nd floor smelled of old money and colder judgment. Lucas Bennett stood at the head of a polished mahogany table, surrounded by the Hawthorne family, the kind of people who measured a man by the silence they forced him into. They smirked. They interrupted. They suggested without ever saying it that his success belonged to someone else. Then Lucas closed his laptop. He stood up. And in front of $900 million waiting on the table, he walked away. Why would a man with everything to lose choose to leave? The Manhattan skyline burned orange behind the glass walls of the Hawthorne Tower as Lucas Bennett stepped out of the private elevator. His shoes made no sound against the marble. The receptionist did not greet him. She only nodded toward the corridor, the way people nod when they assume you already know your place. He had been in rooms like this before. He had never been welcomed in any of them. Lucas had built Aperture data systems from a one-room office above a laundromat in Queens. 8 years. No inheritance. No investors. With last names that opened doors. No degree from the right school. He had taught himself the math, hired the engineers one by one, and signed every paycheck personally for the first 3 years. By the time he turned 34, the company moved enterprise data for 62 of the Fortune 500. The Hawthornes had reached out first. He made himself remember that. David Mercer was already waiting outside the boardroom, holding 2 folders, and the look of a man who had read the room before walking into it. He had been Lucas's CFO since the laundromat days, the only person in the company who had seen every version of him, including the version that ate cold rice for dinner, because the payroll account came first. "They're already inside," David said quietly. "All 3 of them." Charles brought his sister and his son. "That wasn't on the agenda," Lucas replied. "No, it wasn't." The boardroom ran longer than it needed to. A single mahogany table stretched down its center, polished to a surface that reflected the ceiling lights like still water. The Hawthornes did not stand when Lucas entered. Charles Hawthorne sat at the far end, gray hair combed back, hands folded on the table, like a man who had been waiting decades and could wait another hour. To his right sat his younger sister Vivian in a charcoal suit that cost more than most cars. To his left sat his son, Daniel, mid-40s, Princeton ring on his finger, already smiling the kind of smile that carried a question inside it. Lucas took his seat. David sat beside him. Charles opened the meeting with a sentence that sounded like a courtesy and felt like a test. "Mr. Bennett, we've reviewed the materials your team sent over. Impressive growth curve, aggressive margins. We'd like to understand the operation behind those numbers." "Of course," Lucas said. "Where would you like to start?" Daniel answered first. He leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against the rim of his coffee cup. "Let's start with the architecture. Your white paper from 2023 references a proprietary indexing layer. I'd love to know who actually designed it." "I did," Lucas said. "I wrote the original framework in 2020. My team has expanded it since." Daniel let the sound of his own breath hang in the air for a beat. "Self-taught, correct, no formal background in distributed systems. Correct? Fascinating." He said the word the way a man says it when he means the opposite. Vivian set down her glass of water with a delicate click. "Mr. Bennett, forgive me. The numbers you've presented are extraordinary. But extraordinary numbers, in our experience, usually have extraordinary explanations. Sometimes those explanations are not in the room." Lucas held her gaze. "I'm not sure I follow." "What she means," Charles said, his voice even almost bored, "is that companies of your size growing at your pace often have what we call a quiet engine. A senior architect, a former executive, someone who prefers to stay off the cap table. We'd like to know if such a person exists inside your company." The question was not a question. Lucas felt the temperature of the room shift. David had stopped writing in his folder. He had been waiting for some version of this question since the day the meeting was scheduled. He had hoped he would be wrong. "There is no quiet engine," Lucas said. "There is a team. I built it. I lead it. The architecture is mine. The strategy is mine." Daniel laughed, once soft, almost apologetic. That's a very confident answer. It's a true one. Charles lifted his hand half an inch off the table, the smallest gesture, and the room rearranged itself around him. Confidence is admirable, Mr. Bennett, but confidence is not the same as readiness. Aperture is approaching a stage where the variables become global. Regulatory complexity, cross-border infrastructure, public scrutiny of a kind that frankly eats young founders alive. He let the sentence settle into the wood of the table. What we would like to propose as a condition of moving forward is the placement of a senior executive into the role of operating chief. Someone we trust. You would of course retain your title. Founder. Chief executive in name. But the operational voice of the company going forward would belong to someone with a longer record. Vivian smiled the way a woman smiles when she believes she is being generous. Think of it as a partnership of strengths, Mr. Bennett. You provide the vision. We provide the maturity. David's pen had not moved in a full minute. Lucas kept his hands flat on the table. Let me make sure I understand the proposal, Lucas said. You are offering $900 million for Aperture Data Systems on the condition that I step out of the operating role of the company I built and accept a leader of your choosing as the public face of it. In broad strokes, Charles answered, yes. And this person would report to your family. This person would report to the board, of which we would naturally hold the majority. Lucas allowed himself one breath, the kind that does not show on the outside. And the rationale is your concern that I am not yet ready to lead at this scale. Daniel answered this time. The rationale, Mr. Bennett, is that we don't know you. We know your numbers. We don't know what's behind them. And at $900 million, we don't invest in mysteries. Lucas turned back to Charles. I appreciate the directness. Let me match it. The architecture of Aperture is mine. The team is mine. The vision is mine. There is no hidden author. There is a man who started in a borrowed office above a laundromat and built something that the three of you flew across the country to discuss. Vivian opened her mouth to interject. No one is questioning your effort, Mr. Bennett. You're questioning everything but my effort. Charles studied him with the slow patience of a man who had outlasted every challenger who had ever raised a voice across his table. We have a great deal of respect for what you've built, Charles said finally. But respect does not change our terms. Take the evening. Discuss it with your team. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10. If the structure is not acceptable, we can shake hands today and part ways without hard feelings. His mouth moved into the shape of a smile. The smile did not reach any other part of his face. $900 million, Mr. Bennett. With our name attached, that company becomes something neither of us can build alone. Without our name, it remains promising. We both know which of those is the better story. Lucas closed the folder in front of him without looking down at it. I'll see you in the morning. He stood. David stood with him. Neither man spoke until the elevator doors closed. They want to own you, David said. Not the company, you. I know. You've got until 10 tomorrow. Lucas watched the floor numbers tick down. The city beyond the glass had darkened by another shade. When he answered, his voice was quiet. The way a voice is quiet when a decision has not been spoken out loud, but has already been made somewhere underneath. They'll find out tomorrow what they're really buying. Lucas spent the night in his office, not at home. The lights of the lower Manhattan skyline filtered through the blinds in long, pale bars across the floor. He had ordered black coffee twice and drunk neither. On the desk in front of him sat a single sheet of paper with 2 columns. One column listed every reason to accept the deal. The other listed every reason to walk. The second column was shorter, but it carried more weight. David came in a little after 1 in the morning. He set a fresh cup of coffee beside the cold one and lowered himself into the chair across the desk. They aren't buying a company, Lucas said. They're auditioning a man. And the man failed the audition before he walked in the door, David replied. Charles decided that before we ever sat down. Everything today was theater. I know. Then you know what tomorrow looks like. The reasons to accept were practical. Liquidity for early employees, capital to expand into the European corridor, a name on the masthead that would open every regulatory door in Washington. $900 million did not undo 8 years of working from a laundromat. It only paid for them. The reasons to walk were not practical at all. They were the kind of reasons a man only says out loud once and only to himself. The morning came gray and overcast. Lucas wore the same charcoal suit he had worn the day before. He arrived at the Hawthorne Tower at 9:54. David walked beside him, carrying a single folder. They did not speak in the elevator. There was nothing left to rehearse. Charles, Vivian, and Daniel were already seated. The mahogany table looked the same. The chairs were arranged the same. Even the glasses of water had been refilled to the same height. The Hawthorns had wanted the morning to feel like a continuation, not a reset. "Mr. Bennett," Charles began, "I trust you used the evening well." "I did." "Then let's not waste each other's time. Have you had a chance to consider our proposed structure?" "I have. I'd like to walk you through my thinking." Charles tipped his head an inch. Lucas opened the folder David slid across to him and removed 3 pages. He set one in front of each Hawthorne. "This is a summary of Aperture's last 48 months. Revenue, retention, infrastructure expansion, patent filings. Every metric is time-stamped against personnel changes. You'll see that the inflection points line up with hires I made, decisions I signed off on, and architecture I authored." Daniel scanned the page with a flat expression. He set it down without finishing. "Mr. Bennett, I appreciate the documentation. But documentation is not character. We can read a chart. What we can't read is whether the chart belongs to you or to the people you happen to be standing next to when it was drawn. I just told you it belongs to me." "You did." Daniel turned a page in his own folder. "I went through your background last night. Bachelor's from a state school. No graduate work. No affiliations with any of the research consortiums in your sector. Your first job out of college was customer support at a payments company in New Jersey. That's not a profile. That's a starting line. I'm aware of where I started. I'm sure you are. The question is whether anyone you'll need to face at the next level will look at that line and see a starting line, or whether they'll see a ceiling." Vivian leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. The bracelet on her wrist, thin and old, made a sound against the wood that was somehow louder than it should have been. "Mr. Bennett, may I be honest with you? Please. There is a world that you have been very successful at the edge of. Tech, data, the kind of business where outcomes can be measured in code. You have done well in that world. I admire it. But the world we are inviting you into is different. It is a world of dinners, of legacy boards, of conversations in rooms where the agenda is not on paper. People in that world will ask the moment you walk out where you came from, and the answer will follow you. What are you suggesting the answer is? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that the answer matters. We have spent generations in those rooms, and we know how those rooms work. The structure proposed yesterday is not a demotion. It is a translation. We are offering to translate you into a language those rooms understand." Lucas felt something cool settle in the center of his chest. Not anger. Something steadier than anger. "You're telling me," he said, "that the company I built is acceptable to you. The numbers are acceptable. The technology is acceptable. The growth is acceptable. The only thing about Aperture that is not acceptable is the man who built it." Vivian smiled. The same smile from the day before, polished and old. "I would not put it in those words. You don't have to. The words are already in the room." Charles raised one finger from the table. "Mr. Bennett, let me say something plainly. We invest in what we understand. We have been doing it for 3 generations. Every transaction my family has made above $500 million has involved a leader whose career we could trace in detail, whose decisions we could anticipate, whose temperament we had observed across more than one cycle of the market. You are an unknown. You are a talented unknown. But you are still today an unknown. He let that word sit on the table. We are not asking you to be smaller. We are asking you to be legible. David's hand had moved to the corner of his folder and stopped there. Across the table, Daniel had taken out a pen and was tapping it again, that same small rhythm from the day before, a metronome of condescension. Lucas chose his words carefully. He had spent the night choosing them. Mr. Hawthorne, I respect the history of your family. I respect what your name represents in the rooms you've described. But I think you've misread the deal in front of you. Have I? You believe you are buying a company that needs your name to become something larger. I believe you are buying a company whose value is its independence from names like yours. The clients who pay Aperture pay for one reason. They trust that the man who built the system is the man still running it. The day someone replaces me in the operating chair, the trust resets to zero. Daniel snorted soft, almost involuntary. That is a remarkably generous reading of your own importance. It's not generous, it's accurate. The renewal clauses on the top 20 contracts are tied to my continued role, not to the company's, to mine. Your due diligence team has those documents. The silence that opened in the room was different from the silences before it. Charles glanced just once at his son. Daniel did not return the glance. Vivian's bracelet had stopped moving. That clause is unusual, Charles said carefully. If accurate, it would be material to our model. It's accurate. Verify it tonight. Daniel set his pen down. For the first time, his voice carried something other than condescension. If those clauses survive scrutiny, we'll need to revisit the structure of the operating role. You'll need to revisit more than the structure, Lucas said. You'll need to revisit the assumption underneath it. Charles studied him with the long, patient stillness of a man who had decided somewhere in his 30s never to be moved by anyone again. Mr. Bennett, you are a young man with a great deal of pride. Pride is useful in measured amounts. In larger amounts, it tends to cost more than the men who carry it can afford. We are offering you a structure that protects you from yourself. Most men in your position would already have signed. Most men in my position were not in my position when they were younger. Meaning I have been told I wasn't ready before, by people who had less reason to say it than you do, and more reason to mean it. I built this company through that. I am not afraid of being told I'm not ready. I am only ever curious when someone tells me what they're hoping I will agree to as a result. Charles's expression did not change, but something behind it moved. He folded his hands again. Then let me ask you a direct question, Mr. Bennett. Charles's voice had grown softer, which was always when it grew most dangerous. What exactly do you believe we are offering you? If not a partnership of strengths, you are offering me a price. In exchange for the price, you want a version of me that fits more comfortably in the rooms you've described. You want me to be quieter. You want me to step aside in everything that matters, except the title. You want the company without the man, because the man embarrasses the brand you'd like to attach to it. That is a very emotional reading. It's the only reading the words support. Vivian made a small sound, a kind of half-laugh that did not carry any humor in it. Mr. Bennett, this is precisely the kind of reaction that confirms our concerns. A man who is ready for $900 million does not personalize a negotiation. He executes it. Then perhaps I'm not ready for your $900 million. The sentence dropped into the room and stayed there. Lucas had said it the same way a man says the temperature outside. Charles reached for his glass of water and took a slow sip. When he set the glass down, his voice carried the weight of a man who had decided to spend his last card. Mr. Bennett, there will not be another offer at this number. Not from us. Not from anyone in our circle. The doors my family closes do not reopen for the same man twice. I understand it. Do you also understand that the people you are choosing to disappoint by walking away from a structure designed to protect you will not forget the choice? I understand that too. Then I'll ask you one final time. The structure stands as proposed. Operating chief of our selection. Founder title preserved. $900 million wired upon close. Yes or no? The room was very still. David did not look up. Daniel had set his pen down on the page in front of him and was watching Lucas now without any of the casual disdain he had carried into the morning. Lucas looked at Charles Hawthorne. He looked at the table. He looked briefly at the gray window where the morning had hardened into full daylight without anyone in the room noticing. Then he closed his laptop. Not loudly, just enough that the sound carried. He stood up. David stood with him without being told. Lucas placed both hands flat on the polished wood for a moment, the way a man does when he wants to remember the surface he is leaving behind. Mr. Hawthorne, the answer is no. To the structure? To the price? To the family? The deal is done. He did not wait for a response. He walked the length of the table for the second time in 2 days, and this time, no one stood to stop him. The news broke before lunch. By the time Lucas reached his office, the first headline had already pushed through 3 financial wires. Aperture CEO walks from Hawthorne acquisition. $900 million deal collapses on day 2. The phrasing across outlets was nearly identical. The Hawthornes had moved first. They had wanted the story shaped before the market had a chance to ask what had really happened in the room. David walked in 20 minutes later, with 2 phones still buzzing in his hands. 3 board members called within the hour. 2 are nervous. 1 is furious. The investor relations line has stopped going to voicemail and started going straight to silence because the queue is full. And the team, the all hands is at 3. They will have heard by 2. Lucas turned his chair toward the window. He thought briefly about the years before this office, the borrowed router, the folding table he had used as a desk for the first 18 months. The first hire he had ever made, a junior engineer who had taken the job because Lucas had been honest about the risk and honest about the ceiling. That engineer was now running infrastructure in Austin. The afternoon moved in a series of difficult conversations. 2 of the larger institutional investors asked in language that tried to be polite whether Lucas had thought through what he had just done. A board member who had been with him since the 2nd year sent a text that read, "Only call me when you can speak honestly." The press inquiries came in waves. Lucas declined all of them. He did not decline the call from Hartwell Group's senior partner. He had been waiting without admitting it to himself to see whether that call would come. Eleanor Crane was the kind of investor who did not make her name in the press. She ran a private innovation fund that had quietly backed 3 of the most disciplined infrastructure companies of the last decade. Lucas had met her twice, both times briefly, both times at conferences where she had asked sharper questions in 5 minutes than the Hawthornes had asked in 2 days. Her assistant put her on the line a little after 4. "Lucas, I read the headlines." "Most people did. Most people will assume you made a mistake. I'd like to hear from you whether you did." "That depends on what the mistake was supposed to prevent." There was a small sound on her end of the line, something that might have been a laugh. "Fair answer. I'd like to fly out tomorrow. I won't take more than an hour of your time. If after that hour you still want to be alone in this, I'll wish you well and disappear. If not, I'd like to talk about what an actual partner looks like for a company at your stage. I'll have the conference room cleared for 10. 10 works. The all hands at 3 was the harder room. Lucas stood at the front of the company cafeteria. Every chair filled every railing on the upper floor, lined with employees who could not find seats. He did not use a slide deck. He did not prepare remarks. He told them what had happened. He told them what had been asked of him and what he had said in return. He told them that the next 90 days would be uncertain, that some of the people in the room might decide the uncertainty was not worth carrying, and that he would not hold that decision against anyone. He told them one more thing. He told them that he had not built Aperture to belong to a name on a tower. He had built it to belong to the people who had stayed late on the nights when staying late was the only thing keeping the company alive. He said it once plainly, and then he stopped talking. The room did not applaud. It did something better. It went quiet for a long moment, and then it went back to work. That night, Lucas drove home alone. He sat in his apartment with the lights off and the city blinking through the window. He thought about whether he had been right. The answer did not come quickly. When it came in the shape of a memory he had not visited in years. The night his mother had told him in their kitchen in a small town outside Albany that the worst thing a man could trade was the part of himself that other people had not earned the right to ask for. He had been 22. He had not understood it then. He understood it now. Eleanor Crane arrived at 10 exactly the next morning. She wore no jewelry, carried no folder, and shook his hand once with the firmness of someone who did not waste motion. The conversation that followed lasted 92 minutes. By the end of it, she had asked Lucas 11 questions. None of them were about whether someone else had built the architecture. None of them were about his schooling. The first question she asked was about the worst hire he had ever made and what he had learned from it. The last question she asked was what he wanted Aperture to look like in 7 years, if no one in the room ever told him no. She offered him a structure that afternoon. Hartwell Group would lead a growth round. Lucas would retain operating control board majority and full authority over the executive team. The valuation she put on the table was lower than $900 million. It was also clean. There were no silent conditions, no parallel negotiations about who would translate him into anyone's room. He signed the term sheet within the week. The months that followed were not easy. 2 senior engineers left, citing the loss of the Hawthorne deal as a signal of instability. Lucas let them go without arguing. A small wave of clients asked for renegotiated terms. He granted those terms to the ones who asked in good faith and accepted the loss of the ones who did not. The financial press continued to frame his decision as a cautionary tale for most of the first quarter. Lucas did not respond. He worked. By the end of the second quarter, the European corridor he had been building toward for 2 years began to open. A regulatory breakthrough in Frankfurt that had been waiting for the right operator found Aperture instead of one of its competitors. A government contract in the Netherlands followed. By the third quarter, the company had crossed a revenue threshold that no one outside its leadership had publicly predicted. By the fourth quarter, a research note from a major bank, the same bank that had once arranged a dinner between Lucas and the Hawthorns, listed Aperture as the most undervalued infrastructure asset of the year. A year and 3 months after the morning Lucas had walked out of the Hawthorne Tower, Aperture closed a strategic round at a valuation of $2.5 billion. The same outlets that had run cautionary headlines in the spring ran retrospective profiles in the summer. Lucas declined most of the interviews. He gave one. In it, he said almost nothing about the Hawthorns by name. He said only that the most expensive lesson a founder could learn was the difference between a buyer and a partner, and that the difference was almost always visible in the first 10 minutes if a man was willing to look at it. The Hawthorns did not stay quiet forever. A request for a meeting arrived through an intermediary in the fall. The language was careful. The intermediary suggested that Charles Hawthorne would value an opportunity to discuss possible collaboration given how the market had developed. Lucas read it once. He typed a reply himself. Mr. Hawthorne, thank you for the note. We are not seeking outside investors at this time. I wish you and your family well. The follow-up came 2 weeks later. This time, it was Daniel writing directly. The tone had shifted in the way tones shift when men who have been certain their entire lives encounter for the first time a door that is not opening. Daniel asked with what was meant to read as humility, but did not quite reach it whether Lucas would be open to a conversation off the record about lessons learned. Lucas considered the email for an evening. He replied with 2 sentences. Mr. Hawthorne, the conversation you are looking for is one I had a year ago. You were in the room. He never heard from any of them again. The Hawthorne family's broader portfolio did not collapse. Families like theirs rarely collapsed. But the next time Aperture's name appeared in a sector report, the Hawthorne name was no longer in the same paragraph. The next time, a regulatory hearing in Brussels invited an American operator to speak on cross-border data infrastructure. Lucas was the operator they invited. The rooms Vivian had once described the rooms she had said he would need to be translated into sent their own invitations. He went to some of them. He did not change how he spoke when he arrived. David remained CFO. Eleanor Crane joined the board. The original engineer from Austin flew out for the round-closing dinner and made a quiet toast, the kind of toast a man makes when he has known another man long enough to mean something simple without dressing it up. Late one evening, almost 2 years after the morning at the Hawthorne Tower, Lucas stood alone in his office and looked out at the city below. The skyline had not changed. He had. He thought about the sheet of paper with the 2 columns. He thought about the column that had been shorter and had carried more weight. He had not become quieter. He had become exactly the size he had always intended to be. The lesson when he allowed himself to name it was simple enough that he did not bother writing it down. Not every large opportunity is worth taking. The real value of a deal is not the number on the page. It is whether the people across the table see you and respect what they see. Sometimes the most forward step a man can take into the future he actually wants is to walk away from the most valuable thing he has been offered in the present. He turned off the office lights and went home.